Στα κορυφαία δράματα της ανθρωπότητας καταγράφηκε ανεξίτηλα η μικρασιατική καταστροφή. Μέσα από τον άγριο ξολοθρεμό αναπήδησε ο θρήνος του νεότερου ελληνισμού, όπου ομοιότου είχε να ζήσει η ιστορία από την αποφράδα της άλωσης. Άνθρωποι ορφανεμένοι από την ιδιαίτερη πατρίδα τους, αφήνοντας πίσω στο έλεος της φωτιάς και του σίδερου τα σπιτικά και ολάκερη την προκοπή τους. Πάνω από τα σώματα νεκρών άταφων, διπλωμένοι στα δυο από το πέρασμα του χρόνου, βασανισμένοι γέροντες και παιδιά ανήλικα με τον τρόμο στα ορθάνυχτα μάτια, σωριάστηκαν όπως εδώ στα χώματα της ελεύθερης πατρίδας. Μυριάδες ο λαός, γέμισαν τα λιμάνια. Ένα βουβό μυρολόι πλατάγιζε τις φτερούγες του πάνω στη γαλήνια γη. Η ανατριχιά που είχαν εκείνα τα ανθρώπινα πλάσματα έσφιγγε τα μηνύγια. Ήταν όπως γραφτό να σμίξει τότες η Ελλάδα με την Ελλάδα. Δυο απέραντοι κόσμοι της ίδιας φύτρας και της ίδιας μοίρας κατάφεραν μέσα σε λίγο καιρό να αρδεύσουν από το θρύλο την πραγματικότητα. Στην πνευματική μας ζωή το σήμαντρο της ιστορίας θα σημάνει τη μεταρρύθμιση. Οι θησαυροί της Ιωνίας, της αιωλικής γης και του Πόντου θα ξυπνήσουν στην νότρη σκέψη και θα κινήσουν την καινούρια λογοτεχνική γραφίδα. Η Σμύρνη, η Πέργαμος, η Έφεσος, η Αλικαρνασσός, η Μίλητος, η δόξα της Τραπεζούντας και της Νίκαιας θα μεταφέρουν τα σύμβολά τους και θα μεταγγίσουν τη μυστηριώδικη τέχνη στο επερχόμενο πολιτισμό της Ελλάδας. Η γρανιτένια τους θέληση θα επιβάλλει την ομορφιά και θα γεννήσει ένα καινούριο καλλιτεχνικό γόητρο. Το εθνικό δράμα βάζει το δυνατό χαλινάρι του στα φτερωμένα ρομαντικά γράμματα. Ο πόνος, η αγωνία, το ανίποτο μαρτύριο του ξεριζωμένου ελληνισμού της Μικρασίας θα δώσει ένα λόγο βγαλμένο στην κυριολεξία από κόκαλα ιερά. Η λογοτεχνία τούτης της γενιάς, αντιπολεμική την είπαν, θεμελιώνει σε βάθος την πεποίθηση της ειρήνης. Η δυναμική της απαρχή που βιώθηκε πολύ αργότερα ήταν η ιστορία ενός εχμαλώτου. Ένα πνευματικό κληροδότημα που δίδαξε στον νεοέλληνα, καθώς κάποτε είπε όχι στη δουλεία, τώρα να πει όχι στον πόλεμο. Το μαστόρεψε ο Στρατής Doukas, που στάθηκε τότε έτοιμος να ακούσει το οικουμενικό μήνυμα της καταλλαγής των λαών μέσα από τις αναλαμπές της εθνικής τραγωδίας και να καταγράψει με ίστρο και μύχια εμπνοή την ιστορία του έργου, παραδίδοντας το προλαλιά διαθήκης στη σύγχρονη πεζογραφία. Γνωριστήκαμε στα χρόνια της δικτατορίας. Εκείνος γέροντας ερημίτης μέσα στην πόλη, με τη σοφία του, την αναγνώριση και την πνευματικά μάχημη αξιοσύνη, εγώ φέρελπης γραφιάς, με την ανάγκη της πιότερης μάθησης, παραπέρα από τα σπουδαστικά γράμματα. Γέννημα θρέμα της Ανατολής των μύθων ο Στρατής Doukas, γεύθηκε όλη την πίκρα της ξεριζωμένης γενιάς του, που σαν ήρθε το πλήρωμα του χρόνου τη μετουσίωσε αγαθή τύχη στο Μεσοπόλεμο, σε ολόγλυκο χυμό μιας διανόησης αντάξιας στη μνήμη του εθνικού κατατρέγμου. Εσώτατη βιωματική αναγκαιότητα στάθηκε η αφορμή των πράξεών του. Ουδέποτε πρόδωσε την πίστη του στη ζωή και στη δημιουργία με όλες τις απογοητεύσεις που τον πότισε ο περίγυρος των ανθρώπων. Οι αναμνήσεις του, που διατρέχουν ολόκληρο σχεδόν το έργο του, λογοτεχνικό, χρονογραφικό και τεχνοκριτικό, είναι το λάδι στο λίχνο που καίει το χρόνο και η αμέτρητη κόμπη στο κομποσκήνι που καταμετρούν την παράδοση της πνευματικής δράσης. Με αυτές τις πατρώες μνήμες πορεύεται η σκέψη του Doukas, φανερώνοντας τα μικρασιατικά αιωλικά μοσχονίσια, σταθερή πηγή των συγκινήσεών του, που μοιραία υποκινούν τη συγγραφική του έφεση. βρέθηκαν πρόσφυγες στη Θεσσαλονίκη. Ολόκληρη οικογένεια. Γονεί, αδέρφια, ξαδέρφια κοντοχωριανοί. Από εκεί σκόρπισαν σε κάθε μέρος. Ο μικρός αδερφός ο Αλέκος βρέθηκε στην Αυστραλία. Το ίδιο και η Ελένη. Ο Αλέκος Δούκας πρωταγωνιστεί με νεύρο επαναστατικό στη λογοτεχνική και κοινωνική ζωή μέσα στην παροικία των Ρωμιών. Γράφει τα μυθιστορήματα κάτω από ξένους ουρανούς και στην πάλη στα νιάτα, σημειώνοντας «θέλησα να περισσώσω από το τελειωτικό αφανισμό, ηθογραφικό υλικό και πανάρχιες παραδόσεις του Μοσχονησιού, καθώς και τη ζωή του ελληνισμού των παραλίων της Μικρασίας από την αρχή του παρόντος αιώνα ως την τραγική μέρα του ξεκυρισμού του». Ο Στρατής αλληλογραφεί με τον Αλέκο από το 1952 μέχρι τον ξαφνικό θάνατό του στη Μελβούρνη το 1962. Ύστερα από 10 χρόνια, ο Στρατής θα συγκεντρώσει τα γράμματα της αλληλογραφίας και θα τα εκδώσει σε ένα τόμο με τον τίτλο «Ο μικρός αδερφός». Στα κείμενα αυτά αποκαλύπτεται όμορφα σμιλεμένος ο πλούτος των μικρασιατικών αναμνήσεων που τις τριγυρίζουν σύγχρονα πολιτιστικά και παλαιά ιστορικά καθέκαστα. Αλλιεύματα ενός τέτοιου πλούτου αναδύονται και από τα βιοχρονικά ενθυμήματα του Στρατή Δούκα, ο Φώτης Κόντογλου από το Αϊβαλί και ο Μινάς Πεσματζόγλου από τα Σπάρτα. Στο χρόνο που έρχεται, το 2023, συμπληρώνονται 40 χρόνια από τότε που έγειρε για πάντα στη δύση της η μορφή του πρωτοπόρου της σύγχρονης νεοελληνικής πεζογραφίας, του Στρατή Δούκα. Στο έργο του το πνεύμα και το ύφος της μικρασιατικής ρωμιοσύνης θα πλέει ακατάπαυστα μέσα στο ακίμητο φως της Ανατολής του, αφιερωμένο στα κοινά μαρτύρια των λαών.
At the Smyrna disaster, I was with my parents on the harbor front at Pontus. I was dragged from their arms, and I was left behind in Turkey, a prisoner. It was midday when I was taken away with the others. Night fell and the patrols were still bringing men to the barracks. Near midnight the guards came in. We were crammed up against one another and they started hitting us right and left with sticks, kicking those of us who were sitting on the ground, our knees drawn up. Then they picked out as many as they wanted and led him away, cursing as they went. We were scared they'd do away with us all. One of the clerks, who had his office beside the door, heard our pitiful words and beckoned us to come to him. The next time they come and start calling out, "Stay at the back," he said. But not a word to anyone. From that night on, they took people from the barrack rooms every night. When we heard gunfire from Kadife Kalesi, we said to each other, "It's firing practice." After days spent in fear, an officer came with 40 soldiers and took charge of us. They took us out into the yard and separated us from the civilians. That's when I saw my brother. They put us in lines of 4 and ordered us to kneel so they could count us. The officer, who was mounted on his horse, looked us over and said, "I'll see to it that your seed is wiped out." Then he gave the order to march. There must have been about 2,000 men in our column. They marched us straight to the marketplace. A Turkish mob was waiting there and like a horde, fell on us. From all sides they threw tables, chairs, glasses, whatever they could lay their hands on. There were European sailors with them in the coffee houses, and they were looking on for a bit of fun. When we reached Basmahana Hafiz, a reciter of the Quran came out and stood in front of us. He looked at us. Allah, Allah, what's going on? He called out to the Asker Aga, the officer in command. The officer stopped. Captain, over here. He called again. Clip-clop, the captain's horse went over. The captain saluted him. Is this what our book says? The Hafiz asked him. The captain saluted him again, and we passed before them in lines. At midday we reached Halkapinar. There they fenced us around with wire. When night fell, an Efe, a rebel fighter from our village, came. He called to us by name, pretending he was going to save us, but his aim was to do us in. And we fell to the ground so as not to be recognized. At dawn another officer came from Magnesia and we were ordered onto our feet. We walked for hours. We didn't even know where they were taking us, but we could tell from the lay of the land that we were heading for Magnesia. Instead of caning us along the main road, they forced us up through the mountains. And as we weren't on the flat, we began to scatter. We couldn't keep to our lines of 4 and the soldiers kept shouting orders. Lines of 4, lines of 4, we tried, but they kept on breaking up. Those who were weak and fell behind were dragged into the forest by civilians and done away with. After a hard slog we met up with the main road. Again there were mobs waiting for us. Old men, 60 to 80 years of age, carrying ancient daggers, and as we approached they ran towards us shouting at the captain. Let us do what we want with them. No. The captain told them, laughing. We cried out to him, Captain, our lives are in your hands. And we moved on. The roads all about were strewn with stinking corpses. At the springs, there were guards stationed by the fountains where the water ran. At the sight of it we thirsted even more. Many had died of thirst on the road. I was walking with my brother who was carrying a haversack belonging to one of our guards. We've got money, I thought. Why not pay for some water? I'm thirsty. I'll die, I said to my brother. Don't lose heart, he said to me. If they see we have money they'll do us in. I can't stand it anymore. Give them some money for a drink. He gave me some money and I ran straight to the Turk. Some water. I'm dying, I said to him. What's that, you dog? You won't get a drop out of me. Asker Aga, it will be an act of charity. Here, take this money, too. Hand it over, he said to me. And don't let anyone see you. I drank and gave some to my brother. This was in the month of August. Finally, one night, we reached the outskirts of Magnesia. People were waiting for us with clubs in hand. The prisoners are coming. They shouted and ran towards us. Keep back, the captain said to them. When we were doing the fighting you were all having a good time. They scattered, shouting out that one day the Yunanlilar, the Greeks, would try to do away with them again. The captain, annoyed, rounded us up like sheep in a fold and set sentries around us. No water, bread, nothing. Those who had money gave it to the guards for water. My companions gave money to a darky and he brought us a full bucket. Be quick, he said. The captain won't allow it. I drank and drank. My brother pulled me away so he could drink. Then the others rushed to get at the bucket and the water spilt. The next morning, it was still dark, when the captain shouted, "Get ready." We got into lines of 4 and moved off. He marched us into Magnesia. There he put us in some hospital grounds set amongst pine trees, enclosed with railings. He handed us over to a corporal. We were so tired we didn't feel hungry. But we were dying of thirst. We lay like the sick under the trees chewing on the green pine needles. When a few clouds showed in the sky we prayed for rain. The clouds thickened and grew darker. They hung low in the sky, then slowly disappeared again. The sun burned hotter now. Water, water, we shouted in desperation. But no one listened. 5 hours later, a fair-headed, well-dressed Hodja came, and with one voice we begged him. Hodja, Allah askina, for the love of Allah, we're thirsty. Water. He seemed to take pleasure in seeing us in our sorry state. That's how I want to see you till the end, creeping and crawling like snakes. And off he went. Then another Hodja came in a buggy. Once again we called out, Allah askina, some water. We're thirsty. We can't bear it. After having a good look at us, he said, I've had my bit of fun. And he ordered his driver to drive away. 7 days went by like this. Those of us who had money drank water. The others drank their own urine. Many died of hunger and thirst. The guards told us to form a fatigue party to get rid of the bodies. We fought over who would go because the fatigue party would get to drink water. About 20 men took them in carts and threw them away, far from town. In the hospital grounds there were some prisoners of war from Magnesia who told us that the fountain in the yard held water. We didn't believe them. That night we were woken by shouting and learned that the Magnesians had broken the pipe and found water. We got up and scrambled to get to it. The sentries heard the noise and began to fire on us. After quite a few bodies had fallen, they encircled us in barbed wire. In there, we took handfuls of mud and sucked on it. After 7 days the Hodja returned. We cried out, begging him, quiet or I'll leave. He said, I've come to save you. As he spoke they brought us rations of dry bread in baskets. They put us in single file and gave half a loaf to every 2 men. Then they let each of us drink in turn at the fountain. The soldiers told us that an important man had come that very day from Armetli. From now on you'll be treated well. In the evening they stripped us bare. They took whatever we had, rings, watches, even our gold teeth. They roused us in the morning. As we were getting ready, a group of Zabeks with their reed pipes and drums gathered outside. They set to beating us with their rifles as we left. Another officer came. He took charge of us and we moved off. About 3 hours' march from Magnesia there was a large vineyard surrounded by a fence. The officer placed us inside until daybreak, with sentries guarding us. We scattered amongst the harvested vines and ate the leaves with our bread. When night fell, 2 men tried to escape. The sentries caught them and shot them in front of us. In the morning, the captain said to us, infidel dogs, I cry to help you and you run off. He ordered his men to get us to our feet. We marched for hours. At a railway station where we stopped, some Turkish civilians came and asked the officer to let them search amongst us. If they found the man they were looking for, they wanted to take him. Yes, he said, look, and if you find him, take him. Aferum, bravo, bravo. They shouted and entered the throng. They did find him. He was an Armenian, the station gardener. Hey, you Armenian bastard. You're the one we're looking for. What do you want from me? He said, I only have 1 life to lose. And he passed amongst us, head held high, as though wanting everyone to see him. Take him away, the captain shouted. When the Armenian heard this, he threw himself at the man who had first laid hands on him and in a frenzy bit his throat. The others did away with the Armenian on the spot. All he had time to say was, do what you want with me, I've taken my blood. Leaving behind the warm corpse, which they were still kicking about, we set off for Kasaba. There everything was burnt to the ground. They put us in a stockyard. From there we could see other prisoners being marched away, and hearing their tormented cries from afar we thanked the Lord. In the morning they marched us towards Armetli. When we arrived, The captain was waiting for us at the railway station and he told us we'd be staying there. He took us to a bare spot and left us in the sun. We begged him to put us on the other side where there were trees. No, in the sun, he said, and left. In the afternoon it rained. We were glad. We drank water in cupped hands, washed and felt refreshed. When night fell, the captain came and put us under a shelter. Dawn found us still on our feet. It had rained all night. The captain came back in the morning. He had a clerk with him. The captain divided us up into companies and picked out the tradesmen. About 10 bakers and dough kneaders, about 20 carpenters and blacksmiths, and the same number of masons and plasterers. As he sorted them, he said, "You destroyed everything, now build it again." And he handed him over to the soldiers. The clerk called out, "Isn't there a miller amongst you? We have grain to grind. Doesn't any one of you know a miller's work?" My brother and 2 others stepped forward. The kneaders went to the bakery and baked some loaves out of unsifted barley. From that day on we were each issued a quarter of a loaf. One night 2 kneaders stole some dough. They'd planned to escape. The sentry caught them in the act. In the morning he took them to the captain, who was lodged in a hut nearby. "These men stole dough last night so they could escape," the sentry said to him. The captain took out his pistol. "Whoever does such things will die like a dog," he said, and shot them in front of us. Then he put us on fatigue to clean up the station. Our eyes stung from the filth. A sergeant called to run, who was guarding us, set to shouting and beating us so that the women in the train passing by would admire him. If anyone's eyes were hurting badly, he'd say he was taking them to the hospital for treatment, but instead he'd drag them into a ditch and do away with them. One night the captain ordered the guards to tell the neighboring villages that whoever wanted farmhands could come and get them. "Tell them we've got everything: shepherds, masons, blacksmiths, whatever they want." In the morning the village headmen came and began to choose, first 50 then 80, as many as they wanted, as though we were beasts. We decided 12 of us from my village to wait till we heard of a good village, and when they came and asked for more men we'd all go together. A few days later, a corporal, who liked us because we'd given him a belt he'd taken a fancy to when we were first captured, said to us, "Be ready to go. There's a good village close by, Pinabassi near Mount Boz. You'll be treated well." We asked him if he'd be coming with us. "No," he said, "the captain won't let me. I'll hand you over to the headman." He handed us over and we left. As we walked along the road we saw a wild pear tree and fell upon the unripe pears. "Hey, come on," the headman called to us. "It'll be night soon." We walked on again, eating as we went. We reached the village at night. We were separated, 4 of us in 3 different places. We worked 20 days in that place, and from the day we got there we set our minds on escaping. We began secretly putting aside bread for the road and whatever else from our food that would keep. Finally we settled on the day. We'd set off on Friday, at midnight. When the time came I woke my companion and everyone in turn woke each other. But the others had second thoughts. "We've made our minds up," we said to them. "We're leaving," and we left. After we'd walked for an hour or so from the village we came to a cliff overhanging a stream. The stream was so far down we couldn't hear its roar. We came to a stop. There was a village close by. The dogs scented us and started barking. "We'll be discovered," I said to my companion. "We'll have to cross tonight." "Yes," he said. Hugging the rocks and crawling along we started down. But we couldn't go on. Halfway down we stopped at a cave. We waited there till dawn. When day broke we heard voices on the cliff top. The whole village was at our heels, hunting us with their dogs. Their voices slowly faded into the distance. We stayed for a while, hidden, then began to climb down the cliff again. It was almost midday by the sun when we reached the bottom of the hollow. "Lord," we said when we saw the side we had to climb up. We walked for a while, upright, alongside the seething waters. Then we entered them, treading carefully on the slippery pebbles. The water came up to our knees. As we waded on, we heard a rattling sound close by. We were frightened. We drew close together and looked about. Above us, some ravens were flying low, in circles. We bent down and drank some water, though we weren't thirsty. Then we left the stream, dripping wet, and began to climb. The sun was going down as we scaled the cliff, hanging onto clumps of weeds. With great difficulty we made it to the top. The dark had overtaken us. When we got to even ground we looked about. In front of us, a little distance away, were some shepherds' huts. They belonged to Eunuchs. The dogs started barking. The shepherds called to each other. "The dogs are barking. There are people about," and they fired their rifles into the air. We turned towards the cliff and walked along the edge, bending low, until we came to an abandoned village. As we walked through the ruins we heard a whimper a few feet ahead of us. We drew nearer. A dog was lying on a mattress whose straw had spilled out. When the dog saw us it tried to stand up but couldn't. It wagged its tail on the ground, blinked its eyes which shone in the moonlight, and whimpered once again. We sat down next to it, leaning against a low wall in the crumbling yard. Featherless hens, dried up with thirst, roosted on piles of broken things. We thought of making off with one but were afraid to light a fire. We looked at the dog again, then set off. We walked all night in the moonlight, startled by our own shadows. Towards dawn we reached the Mount Boz pastures where goats were grazing. A woman was tending them. We hurried to get past but didn't make it. The herd surrounded us. The woman was stooped over, knitting. She didn't notice us. We passed by. On the fourth day we reached Odamus. On our way we came upon a mill. "Hey," I said to my companion. "We can't just keep walking on and on." And I motioned towards the mill. "What?" he said. "Break in." We both agreed but then changed our minds. Afterwards we came to a main road and went into the forest to hide. Around midday we saw a hunter on the opposite ridge. His dog was barking. We were afraid. We crawled along about 10 meters and lay low behind a tree trunk waiting for the hunter to go. We got tired from waiting. He stayed till late at night. Then, crossing ourselves, we started our journey. Before dawn we reached the outskirts of the town of Banyos. Its olive groves stretched almost as far as Bayandir. We were so hungry we set to eating the green olives, which left a bitter taste in our mouths. After we'd allayed our hunger a little, we stood there looking at the town. Opposite us was the railway line. The train came and went 2 or 3 times. The people who got off scattered onto the roads. We couldn't get through. It was getting dark and the roads were still full of people. We left late in the night. We passed Bayandir quickly and reached the Meander River. The water came up to our waists. We crossed over. As we stepped out, we saw sheep. We couldn't turn back. We stumbled into the flock. The dogs rushed at us and we kept them at bay with our staffs. They kept at us. We calmed them down and, bending low, slowly withdrew. After we'd left the flock a good way behind, we sat down. We could not take another step. Even a small child could have caught us. Finally, we reached the outskirts of our village. We went into the forest and from there we could see the village on the hilltop, just as we'd known it. There were about 50 lights burning. Dogs were barking. It was just as we had left it. We wept. We felt like deserters returning from war to the peace of our homes. "Let's go," my companion said. "Our people may still be there. Let's go and see for ourselves." We set off separately after arranging to meet the next day at the cave. We headed for different neighborhoods. Wherever we went we found everything in ruins. The houses open, empty, the doors smashed with axes. There were only a few Turks still living around the square and a sentry was posted at the police station. Inside the school, where they'd piled up clothes and furniture, voices could be heard. I drew back and wandered about all night, fearing for my sole companion. When we met in the morning we broke down and cried. We had counted on finding at least something left behind by our people in the village. But we'd found nothing, and in desperation we fell upon the fig orchards. With the rain, the figs had rotted but the chestnuts and the olives were ripening. We gathered as much fruit as we could and took it to our cave. One day as we sat outside looking at a mill opposite, I said to my companion, "No matter how much I eat I still feel dizzy. Why don't we keep a watch on the mill and raid it when the miller leaves?" "Let's do that," he said. And we went. The miller's customers